Buongiorno, siamo qua per la conferenza stampa della serie HBO Scenes for a Marriage che sarà trasmessa in Italia da Sky TV a partire dal 20 settembre, una puntata per settimana, e vi presento a partire dalla destra in fondo gli ospiti al tavolo. Il produttore Lars Blomberg, Mike Ellenberg, Oscar Isaac, il regista e sceneggiatore Hagai Levy, Jessica Chastain e la sceneggiatrice Amy Herzog. I'm going to start with just a question for Hagai, just to contextualize. Hagai, why was Bergman's Scenes of a Marriage so influential for you?
Well, why? I guess it has to do with the timing I watched it first. I was like really, really young. I wasn't not prepared for that. And I was shocked. And it made me realize for the first time that television can be like really art. And then everything I did, I went to see that again and again. So, so when I did In Treatment, when I did The Affair, every time it was my reference. So when I've been approached by Ingmar Bergman's son Daniel, it was like I was excited and frightened at the same time. But I knew I have to crack it. I have to do it somehow.
I think there is a question here. Steve.
Hi, Stephen Schaefer here for the Boston Herald. Oscar Isaac, you've got 3 different entries here at the Venice Film Festival. How do you do it? Do you ever not work? And for you and Jessica, with these incredibly intense roles, is it easy to say goodbye once you've wrapped the movies? And Jessica, that would include Tammy Faye.
Yeah, it has been a wild festival, but luckily they've been so kind to line it up so that I could do one night after the next. It's been really fun. I will say I was a little overwhelmed at the prospect of coming out and how I was going to find the energy, because I'm also in the middle of shooting something in Budapest. But it's actually given me a lot of energy being out here and getting to share these projects with everybody after holding on to them for such a long time. And that is an interesting question about saying goodbye, but we don't really say goodbye because we have like a little parent group with our kids, and so we've been able to continue seeing each other, and we've been friends for such a long time that there's no goodbye.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess for me, what helps when, having this and Tammy Faye and The Forgiven is that it's just, they're all so different, the characters and the experiences. So I'm very happy to talk about them, because if every day is like a new conversation, it doesn't feel like things are being repeated.
Didn't you two meet at Juilliard? And so you've known each other for years. That must have really helped in this project, which is so intense for both actors and for both characters.
Oh, mine's still on. Yes, it's a blessing, and we joke it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because there's immediate trust. You don't have to get to know each other. You don't have to be polite and like, oh, did I offend this person? We can be completely honest about everything. But also, the difficult thing is sometimes you need a break from it, and we also got to the point where we were like reading each other's minds. So I was like, get out of my head. You just really I felt on this job that there was no like quiet time.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, because, yes, like professionally, when you know someone so well, what I'm meaning, like when you're friends with somebody and you know someone so well and then you're working on something, it's great because exactly like Jessica said, you don't have to like worry about all the other stuff that you usually have to worry about. However, on something this intense too, you care about the person so much, and we care about each other so much, and I think that exactly, whereas maybe if you didn't know someone so well, getting your space or being like, I don't want to talk to this person today because I'm so in my, you can't do that either because it's like family, right? So you don't want to do that either. So it has its own challenges.
Yes, hi, Ruben from Belgium. One of the things that stood out for the original version, the original series, is that it wasn't at all about God, which is unusual for Bergman. Why did you decide to bring her back? Because we all know that God is a woman. And how did that inform the actors? I mean, that part of the story.
You mean bringing back the religion into the picture? First of all, it's not accurate. I mean, if you watch carefully the original, you see that there's a lot of God there and a lot of monologues about the concept of love as in the as in the Bible and everything. Mm-hmm. It's more hidden, but it's quite religious piece. So it's very interesting. I had to find my way into this, and one of the idea that I have is actually bring back, some kind of religious background, but it's very different. Hence, because of the difference between Christianity and Judaism is very much. I think the way I wanted to use religious is this. Because I wanted him to be like the new man, like a softer man and more inhibited and more complicated, I felt a religious background would bring that to the character, So it wasn't exactly about, it was more like a metaphor for the new phase that men are facing these days. That make sense to you? Okay, good.
I mean, and if it's okay for me to add that there's also something incredibly autobiographical about it as well, about your own life,
That's what I meant when I say my way into the character, because I was directing in America. It's not my culture, it's not my language, so I had to do everything to know something about those characters. So that's my background. I grew up as a religious person until I was 20, and I felt that I know something about that. And again, I know something about what kind of inhibitions and problems and sex problems or whatever that you come with when you grow up like that. So
religious trauma.
Yeah. And I think Oscar knew also about that because you grew up also in
with religious trauma. Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Sì, una domanda per Jessica Chastain, e sono qui. Oggi passava in concorso un film che parla del fare l'attore, no? E mi chiedevo, con una storia del genere, come questo lavoro può in qualche maniera riverberare poi nella vita privata, insomma, se ci si porta a casa qualcosa, se ci si confronta, e in questo senso anche che rapporto ha con l'Italia, con questo territorio.
I think it depends on each job, each role, what bleeds into your life. Just like the original, and it's funny. I was with Lee Volman a week ago, and we talked about the experience of doing scenes from a marriage. And just like the original goes into your personal things that you may think or struggle with, Haggai has this beautiful ability to do that here. And I remember at one point I was writing morning pages for him. He asked me to write, wake up in the morning and write things that I would share with him. So it felt incredibly exposed. And it was hard to go home and leave it at work, because part of myself was in it, and also part of it wasn't. Mira is, as an actor, we have to take one tiny kernel, one seed that we relate to the character, and we grow it inside of us until it grows, it takes over. At least that's my process. And so with this, it was a complicated situation, but I have an incredibly supportive and wonderful husband, which brings me to Italy, your second question. And I have a very, very close relationship with this region. I'm married to this region, so it's a second home for me. And I just spent 2 months being in Italy, eating every kind of pasta that you guys have ever deliciously invented. So yes, it's home. New York City will always be my base, but Italy definitely feels like home.
What a pro.
Adam Tansworth from the UK. In the history of cinema and TV, we've seen relationships examined in a lot of different ways. What are you most eager for audiences to see Oscar and Jessica in this show, in terms of the relationship, and what new things will we see?
Well, yeah. I mean, in drama, relationships have been definitely investigated throughout the history of drama. That's very true. My hope is just that it feels honest and it feels true, and that there's maybe some catharsis in seeing these two people grapple this way with their relationship and what it means to be together and what it means to love one another and what it means to be willing to let one type of idea of love die in the hopes of finding something truer. I know we all just have gone through a really difficult time where we've had to, by force, be really close together and be at home. And, the journey of that, I think for most people has been really interesting, sometimes incredible and sublime, and other times, you're going to kill yourself and go out of your mind if you have to talk to this person one more time or look at this person one more time. And so that journey, I hope, is relatable.
For me, I'm really excited about looking at the film in terms of, have we met? In terms of gender roles. Because if you look at the original, it looks at the gender roles for that time period, and I think this one explores gender roles in a relationship in the current time period, in terms of salary, who is supporting the family, in terms of what it means to be a mother, a woman's relationship to sex. All of these things, that's what's so exciting to me about re-examining Scenes from a Marriage today, is I think the piece really allows you to look at what it meant to be a wife and mother in that time, and what it could mean also in this time in terms of fertility, there's so many aspects of this that I think is going to be exciting for people to see.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, just what Hagai has done with really examining the psychology of that, and all of the incredible thorough research that you've done to really talk about those exact issues and how they manifest themselves at this time, I think is so anthropologically interesting and accurate that I find that also very exciting.
Hagai, how do you think, and maybe Amy should join in on this one, how do you think the institution of marriage itself has changed since when Bergman did this series and to today?
Maybe I should say that marriage is not so much an institution anymore as it used to be in the 70s, because what Bergman did is like a very direct attack on the institution of marriage. While today, this is like an institution that's been attacked so many times. It's not anymore like a castle or institution or anything. So actually, I felt that I sometimes should do the opposite, maybe by reminding that also separation is very, very hard. Also ruining this institution is really traumatic. Yeah, Amy, maybe you should.
Yeah, looking again at the original, it's really striking how little the children enter into the story of Johann and Marianne. And in a way, it's so refreshing for me as an American mother. Our families revolve so entirely around the children. That's sort of a cliche about American culture and American parenthood, but it's true. So watching it, and you feel sort of like in the original, the kids are doing their own thing and they're almost irrelevant to the story of this marriage, which is fun as an audience member, but also would be impossible to translate into a contemporary American context. So one of the most interesting parts of the adaptation for us, for me, was thinking about, how much being parents and co-parenting enters into the story of a divorce, which almost feels like the main, as opposed to being the end of a marriage, it feels like the end of a family arrangement that still has a place of kind of sacredness in American life, and that's one taboo that sort of hasn't been broken, that children should be protected.
At which point of the adaptation did you decide to flip so that it's the wife that announced that she's leaving?
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was the moment when I felt that I have a good reason to do this remake. Because for years, I felt, why should we remake it? I mean, it's there. I mean, I know it's not in English, so for Americans, it's not there. But for most of the people, it's it's there. So I feel if I need to have a good enough reason. And flipping it suddenly became a very interesting experiment, like gender experiment. And it gave the whole story a totally new angle and modern angle, and actually it made the characters closer to myself, because the original character, before swapping it, I felt like, who is this guy that he's such an asshole, and who is this woman who is so weak and dependent? And by flipping it, suddenly they became like really people that I can identify and like, and yeah.
And there's a question for Helen.
Hi, Helen Barlow from Australia. I have a question for Jessica and Oscar. I had the privilege of watching all 5 episodes at once, and I binge watched them one Friday night. I couldn't stop. I was so immersed in the romance. I just thought it was so poignant. And it's hard, romances these days. There aren't many good ones, I don't think. Do you agree with me? How did you decide the level of intimacy you would go for? Sometimes people try too hard with too much music, too much sex. I think you got it just right, but it must have been really hard to achieve. Could you discuss that, please?
Because of our friendship for so long, that was one thing that I was thinking about, in playing this. And we did this thing, it was amazing. So they have these books that they give to couples, and I got it, my husband and I got it, but it was too cheesy to do it. It was basically like person A and person B, and you answer all these questions. So I filled it out from my character's point of view. So it was things like, what was your favorite memory of your wedding? And so I was imagining their wedding, and then I wrote something down, like watching Jonathan dance. And then I handed it to Oscar, and he filled out his answers from Jonathan's point of view. So we had this Bible of the relationship before the beginning of episode 1. So that kind of it started us on a new, like, okay, it's not Oscar, this is Jonathan. Here we go, this is the story we're telling. And in terms of like the physical intimacy that's in our series, we had an intimacy coordinator, and from the very beginning, HBO was really great with having, all of us having conversations. What are you comfortable with? We all talked about it, and Oscar and I are really comfortable with each other, so we talked about it also separate, and that was helpful. I would still get embarrassed. So bourbon helped a lot, but the level of trust was high.
Oh, you don't work. I don't work. Yeah. It's funny because we also speaking specifically about the intimate scenes, we watched a lot of movies of like intimate scenes. We're like, that's really good. We don't want to do that. Let's watch Postman Always Rings Twice again. How can we do something like that? That's really intense, So yeah, we kept, trying to find like what's like you said, yeah, there's so much times you just don't really buy it. And then it can get too gratuitous, and that you don't really buy that either. And so finding the line between something that felt raw and truthful, but also, wasn't just totally self-involved in that kind of way. So that's something that we did a lot too, and that's the thing too. That was the beauty of getting to work together again, is that we didn't have to work at pretending to have chemistry or intimacy, and that's often a lot of energy goes into that. You have to spend a lot of energy trying to figure out what's the dynamic there when you're working with somebody else, especially when there's a romantic element involved. And that all we had to worry about was how do we figure out who these people are and make those kind of choices. And even that amazing thing that she did, that super nerdy, amazing thing she did about bringing in that book, which is exactly my kind of vibe, it wasn't an intellectual exercise, because, we were just making it up. It was at the very beginning. So I don't know. It's like, what did your mother say when you brought her home for the first time? I'm like, I don't, you just kind of guess. But even that exercise alone already began the building of this relationship that we could refer to.
Okay, can you, there is a question there. I will defer.
Hi, Jan Andersson from Sweden. A question for Oscar and Jessica. You're too young to have grown up with Bergman's films, but of course you can have seen them afterwards. What's your relationship with his films?
I had the great privilege of being in a film directed by Lee Volman, Miss Julie, and so I spent a lot of time with her, which led me to read her books. I read her daughter's books. Of course, I've watched all of their films, their collaborations. I got to hear all the really interesting stories that didn't make the book because they were too salacious. So I feel a kinship to that time. And even though I didn't grow up with it, I feel as though somehow I were a part of it because of the connection I have with her. So when this whole thing was coming together, and I read it and I understood that it would be a different experience than the original was, because you cannot improve the original. It's just perfection, and Leave is perfection. It was just a slam dunk for me to be involved.
I love Bergman's films, and so actually did grow up watching them, and I was lucky enough to get to work with Max von Sydow as well on that first Star Wars film I did, and just I just picked his brain so much and really fell in love with him, and we actually kept a correspondence for some time, which I loved so much. So and then I'm also married to a Scandinavian woman and have little half Scandinavian kids. I've spent a lot of time up there, and I feel like I have a kinship with that very dry sense of humor, that cold sense of humor. It was very exciting to get to kind of pay homage and honor Bergman's original work.
Jessica, did you discuss this project with Lee Volman as you were working on it?
Not as I was working on it. I sent her an email very early on and basically said, I'm not playing Marianne. Like, there's only one Marianne, that's you. I just, yeah, exactly. I wanted to be very clear that, and for me, when we were shooting Miss Julie, in the beginning, the very first day, she was standing next to the camera as I was acting, and I had to go to her and I said, I can't have you there because the whole time I'm acting, I think you should be playing this part, So it was I wanted to make her understand that there was no connection to what she did. But yeah, we've discussed it since, and we had she's a great supporter and mentor of mine.
Hello, Kara from Poland. I wanted to continue the topic from previous questions. Do you think Bergman would like your version of the story?
Maybe Lars should answer that, right?
Anyone should. Exactly.
Not working. They can't hear you, Lars, so maybe... Come over here? Yeah, maybe we... yeah, just go there.
So, anyway, I said Ingmar is dead. It's been dead for a long time, but all through this process, the family's been involved, and they are really happy that we are so loyal to the original and that we stay so close and show so much respect. We also have the Ingmar Bergman Foundation, or the proper nerds and knows everything about Bergman, and they've been cheering us all the way through. So I feel pretty confident that even Ingmar is happy about this.
I have a question for Hagai. So you have a mic now, right? Okay. One of the liberties another of the liberties you took is to basically restrict the physical, limit the physical space where the story takes place, which makes it even more intense.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, in the original, you have like 3-4 main location, which is the house and the summer house and the office. I felt that I want to explore also the idea of a house, of a character. You know, I've been through stuff like that, and I always noticed how the house is like kind of a silent spectator of what's going on and how he's changing all the time, and those changing reflects what happens in relationships. So that was actually one of the first ideas that I had, and yeah. Michael, do you want to add something about that, like about the house idea?
It's interesting, I think, from cinematically and visually, it was a world unto itself. So there are a lot of different ways to do a world-building exercise. There's Game of Thrones, and there's Scenes from Marriage, and they both have worlds. And I think with you and with Kevin Thompson, our designer, the idea also around the final episode and around the addition. So there's, the house gets more and more naked, more and more impersonal to them, and until it's completely foreign, it's someone else's. And then there's this magical space that both Jonathan and Mira can enter, and I think it helped, first and foremost are their performances, I think, for an audience, obviously of being completely committed, but this sense of reality, of you're there. And I think Hagai was very conscious in the direction. I think the same location allows this experience that for the audience, you're 7 feet away from them. It's incredible to be that close, and it's almost rude. Yeah. and so the consistency of the location allows an audience, we hope, to really feel that presence, that you're there with these people for those 5 hours. So.
I would just add, we were making it during COVID, so the whole world was reconsidering their relationship to their homes, and for us, we were all working on it from our homes, seeing each other's homes on these little windows, and then we got to escape and make something together, but we created our own home that was its own kind of enclosed shelter and prison.
It was very funny to, sometimes it would be snowing outside and we'd be driving up and you'd go into the studio and there's a fake snow machine inside. And it was very uncanny, sometimes going from our own little cloisters into this other little cloister that was recreating what was happening outside as well in such a direct, literal way.
I think we have time for one more.
Actually, a follow-up on what you're just talking about. Why did you decide to include that into the series, the whole artifice of it?
Yeah, that's a question. It was an instinct, I have to say. It was a very late instinct. It wasn't in the script. It was when we started rehearsals and I saw the stage building, and I felt, I don't want to pretend that this is like a totally like a hyper-realistic reality. I wanted to say, listen, this is more general, this is more abstract, This is like about every couple and in every place and every time, And what I want to discuss with you, the audience, is like marriage as a concept, monogamy as a concept, but not specifically this. So that was like an instinct that I had. And then actually it provided also to show that we were shooting in a very specific time. We're not ignoring what happened in the world at that time. And probably everyone will see in this device something else. I don't know, Michael, do you want to say something about that too? It's like the...
This doesn't work. Yeah, it works. Hello? Oh, sorry. Maybe the house, I think it's related in a certain way to what was done with the house. When you're in the theater, that experience, kind of wonderful experience, when certain directors, the action suddenly begins. The actors come down they come through the aisle, and it begins, and you're sort of surprised by it and drawn into it. And so rather than it putting you further away, I actually think going in with Jessica, going in with Oscar, and as human beings, and they begin this, right? And then become Jonathan, they become Mira. It was inviting to the audience, and it kind of humanized it further, and it'll let you know, they look, like the scale of intensity and demand on the two of you. So it looks effortless when you watch it from an acting perspective. It's not, obviously, and so I think it also I think it aided the sympathy to Jonathan and Mira also, which is how much these two had to pour into it, and so I think it just added to the whole intimacy of the whole experience.
Can I just say, I think there's something quite Bergman-like about it too. In the original, at the end when he would read the credits over, like, now you will look at these beautiful pictures of the Faroe Islands, and here are the credits. And for us to maybe less comedic effect, having some distancing element. I don't know what it is, but it's very disarming in a great way. And then the other thing it reminds me of is like two boxers going into the ring, or like WWF kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember actually when you were first talking about it, and it was the four of us in a room, and we had just started rehearsals before we ever even saw the set. We were rehearsing, I think, at BAM, and you actually said, because Oscar and I, we have such a shorthand, and we were joking that we were each other's acting coaches, because if I didn't understand a scene, he would help me and ask me questions, and not tell me how to do it, but like help me, and I would help him. And I remember in the very beginning when you first brought it up, he said, I need to figure out a way of showing this, because what we're experiencing in the rehearsal room is so beautiful. And how do we show Oscar and Jessica and your guys' connection also with the characters and going into that? And that in that rehearsal room, you started showing us images of breaking the fourth wall, which sounded very exciting. So you can see almost that, especially at the end of the series, when we're walking away from Jonathan and Mira, you see these two people and this friendship. And I think it ends the whole thing on a very beautiful note.
And this is all we have time for. They already came to call me. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the work.